The World Economic Forum ended last week with the world's political and economic elite gathering in Davos, Switzerland, to discuss bold new ideas. But one man, historian Rutger Bregman, made a claim that took many attendees by surprise. Let's listen.
Almost no one raises the real issue of tax avoidance, right? And of the rich just not paying their fair share. I mean, it feels like I'm at a firefighters conference and no one's allowed to speak about water. 10 years ago, the World Economic Forum asked the question, what must industry do to prevent a broad social backlash? The answer is very simple. Just stop talking about philanthropy and start talking about taxes.
And Rutger joins me now from Amsterdam. He is a historian and author of Utopia for Realists, How We Can Build the Ideal World. Rutger, thank you so much for being with us. That little video of yours has had quite the journey on social media where we saw it, and we thought it was very interesting because, you know, you're sort of bringing up the question of philanthropy versus taxes. So public good coming either through the individual generosity of billionaires or through, you know, programs that are decided upon by our elected representatives, right? So tell us, first of all, what do you have against philanthropy? Why don't you like philanthropy?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with philanthropy. But the thing at the World Economic Forum is that here are the world's richest, the most powerful people talking about transparency and education and all these kind of things that all sound very nice. But then if you really look what's behind all that is a business model that is all about exploiting people who do the real work and not paying your fair share in taxes. So when philanthropy becomes a distraction from that issue, you know, the real issue, then I think we should, you know, be careful.
It's interesting because in Davos, obviously, you're bringing up the elephant in the room because here are a bunch of billionaires and the last thing that they want to do is voluntarily pay more taxes. But they would say, you know, why should we trust the government with our money if we can give money directly to causes we feel strongly about and we can spend it in a smarter way? Do you buy that argument?
Yeah. Well, you know, I'm a historian. So what I try to make clear is that, for example, the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, what historians call the golden age of capitalism. And, you know, when you guys put a man on the moon, the top marginal tax rate was way higher than it was now. You know, it was above 80, above 90% during Republican President Eisenhower. The estate tax was much higher as well. And back then, you know, we had a very different kind of economy that was way more innovative. Growth was higher. And it all worked perfectly well together with higher taxes on the rich. But people have forgotten this history, so I just try to remind them.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up because now this is coming back up. People are talking about marginal, you know, tax rates, and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, as you know, is plugging a 70% top tax rate. Senator Elizabeth Warren is making a wealth tax part of her platform. So this is becoming a conversation. Do you think that in the past, you know, billionaires or the 0.0001% have been able to manipulate the narrative around taxes or the conversation around taxes?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. So what we've come to believe is that these people that are meeting in Davos, the billionaires, that they are all great entrepreneurs, you know, creating all these jobs, coming up with these terrific innovative products. But what so many people don't know is that actually most breakthrough innovations are funded by the state. You know, so take the iPhone, for example. Every sliver of fundamental innovation in the iPhone, the touchscreen, the battery, the internet, mobile technology, everything that makes it a smartphone was funded by the government. But again, we are being told this narrative that all innovation comes from Silicon Valley, while in reality, often they just, you know, are surfing the waves that are created by government and then not paying their taxes. So I really think that private and public sector need to work together, you know, just as in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. But we really should do something about this huge issue of tax avoidance and the slowing rate of innovation.
Well, I wonder, Rutger, if you think that change may be coming, because as you pointed out, you know, in the golden era of capitalism, as you call it, we did have a top tax rate of over 90% here in the U.S. That fell dramatically. I believe now it's around 40%, if I'm not mistaken. What led to that dramatic shift in taxing the wealthy?
Oh, that's a huge question. I mean, what you saw since the 70s and the 80s with the rise of Reagan and Thatcher in the UK is just a whole different narrative. People started to believe that taxes and governments are, I don't know, sort of fundamentally evil. And we started to forget that actually a lot of good services and innovation is being funded by the government. So take, for example, the question whether people consider their job meaningful or not. There was recently a poll done by 2 Dutch economists where they asked people this question. Turns out that actually 4 times as many people in the private sector think that their job doesn't add anything of value as in the public sector. So, I mean, when we talk about the public sector, we're talking about nurses, we're talking about care workers, we're talking about cleaners, we're talking about, so many things that are incredibly important. And there's now a new generation that is actually, that actually realizes that.
So Rutger, do you foresee a scenario where we could return to a higher top tax rate? And by the way, I should point out that we're talking about people who are making an income of over $10 million a year when we discuss the top tax rate, correct?
Exactly. I think that is definitely what is happening. I think 10 years ago, it would have been unimaginable that a Dutch historian talking about taxes would have gone viral in the United States. So, I mean, here I am.
So who knows?
It has happened.
Change may be in the air. All right, Rutger Bregman, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.